Welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to be reviewing the Desert Fathers, which there's no author for the Desert Fathers because it was simply a collection of sayings that were passed on over time, something along the lines of the Epic of Gilgamesh, where you have things that have been copied and passed on, and these are sayings that of different Desert Fathers in different parts of the Eastern world that were handed down. And this Penguin edition puts it into different categories. So, for example, you'll have chapters on self-control, or fortitude, or discretion, or lust, or obedience, etc. And, I mean, it's quite something to read this because the words of Hamlet, I think this is at the end of Act 3, I think it's the end of Act 3, where Hamlet's being shipped off. He says, "This is the imposthume of much wealth and peace." And I think about that because for us in this wealthy time, relative peace, you could say, we can't conceive of going off to the desert to dedicate your life to God, as the way many of these hermits did, or even living in monastic communities. That is a reaction to a more serious view of life. The view of life that concludes that there is nothing more certain than death, and there is nothing more uncertain in the manner in which you will die. Can't take credit for that saying. That obviously comes from a Catholic saint, whose name I can't recall at the moment. But these men and women knew this saying, they believed this saying, and they went off to the desert to prepare for their death. They saw this life as passing, and rather than invest their time, say, enjoying this life, they wanted to spend their time meriting for the life to come. And it's astonishing to those of us who live in a society where there are so many amusements, so many things to keep you from being bored. The word fun is an operative part of being happy, being fulfilled. When the reality is, I think Blaise Pascal wrote this in the 1600s, all of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And this was a problem that these Desert Fathers faced on a day-by-day basis. How do I deal with my existence? How do I deal with my relationship to God? How do I deal with my faults, my problems, my sins? How do I deal with the people in relation to me? How do I deal with material goods, the lack of having them, and the not having attachment to those things? When you read the text, you find yourself, I think, at times very strongly affected. You think, "Oh, this is crazy talk," and that was my first reaction on reading some of the measures that these men and women took, or the phrases they would say. "Oh, this is extreme. This is crazy," but I realized that that's because I'm not on their level. I'm so far below them spiritually that the measures they take, which they consider quite ordinary, seem to me to be ridiculous. And I would relate this to mountain climbers. So I'm quite interested in K2, Everest, and Annapurna, the Eager. Why do men and women climb these things? What is it about climbing mountains, or even running marathons? So mountain climbers and marathon runners, in the natural order, in doing these things, they show us what is possible. They push the limits of our capacity in the natural order. I also think they serve to humble us. I remember the first and only marathon I ever ran. I beat Oprah's time, so that's all that matters. I ran 3:59:59. The marathon I ran, the way that the course was structured was that as you were entering your final 6 miles, you were going into a loop, which meant that you were watching the runners who were coming out of that loop, and they were going into a stadium to finish. So as I was going into that loop, meaning I still had 6 more miles to go, I was watching 55, 60-year-old people coming out of that loop. And and I was 21 at the time. And I just remember saying, all right, I got it. Message received. I'm no good." And I think that's one of the wonderful aspects of the Desert Fathers, both on a natural level and a supernatural level. So, for example, mountain climbers and marathon runners, I think they have a lot to give to us naturally. I don't know that they have too much to give us supernaturally, but the Desert Fathers can give us both, because they're out there fasting, which obviously has a supernatural component to it. It's for a reason. It's not for nothing. But it has the natural aspects too. Fasting is now the new trendy thing to do. You see it recommended in diets. You see it recommended on podcasts. So in the natural order, fasting is good for you. Just period. It's good for your health. It so happens that when offered to God in the context of our sins, in the context of offering back to God what he has given to us, it makes sense supernaturally. And so the Desert Fathers can bridge these two worlds for us, the natural world and the supernatural world, and show us where are the outer limits we can push ourselves to in both of those categories. How far can I push myself naturally? How far can I push myself supernaturally? And societies always need these men and women who are going out there to push boundaries so that they can ask us to push boundaries within ourselves. Not all of us are meant to go out to the desert. Not all of us have the personality to be hermits. So there is a call to holiness, and there is a call for us to seek something better than ourselves, but we can do that within our own families, with our children, with our parents. That what they're doing is establishing a standard for us to then take back and say, well, what can I apply to my own life? So yes, one of the fathers here, let's say, fasts on one meal a day for weeks, months, years at a time. You may not be able to do that because of your work, because of your relationship to your family, however it might be, but can I maybe not eat in between meals? Could I deny myself, a treat that I'd really like? And remember, there are other people in the world that are missing that, and I can participate a little bit in their suffering and also offer something to God, who, after all, has created me, given me this wonderful gift of life, and I can express my gratitude in that way by stepping back. And it's always when we take a step back from something that we appreciate it all the more. So it doesn't mean that you never have to have a piece of chocolate cake again. It just means that when you've deprived yourself of it, as let's say during the fasting period in Lent before Easter for Christians, that you really appreciate it when it comes out. A lot of people don't realize that the reason those eggs, we have all of these colored eggs, the tradition is because for many centuries, Christians didn't eat eggs at all. This discipline was relaxed in the West, but not in the East. And that meant that come Easter time, all those eggs that people have been storing up, they got brought out, and it was an egg feast. And so they were brightly colored. And I think there's some resonance there today that if people want to celebrate with eggs, they should consider giving up eggs for at least some portion of Lent. Anyway, that as an aside, I think that it's not long. It's under 200 pages in this Penguin edition. Obviously, you can find all sorts of editions. You might notice that in my reviews, I tend to favor Penguin a lot. I'm not going to run away from that. I have a great love for Penguin's desire to bring the world's classics for an affordable price. That was initially Penguin's mission. They are continuing to do that today. I don't agree with everything the Penguin does, but they are still producing inexpensive editions, well done, and they often have great introductions that give you better context. And so, while obviously you don't have to get the Penguin edition of the Desert Fathers, it's an easy way to enter this text. It has a good introduction, but obviously I think you can find free versions on the internet and elsewhere. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of these types of videos, hit subscribe. This was a video that was available first to my patrons months ago, but now is available to you on YouTube. And if you'd like to help support this work, you can consider subscribing. But otherwise, thanks for listening and enjoy your reading.